Bonsoir, good evening, and Happy New Year, if I can still say that. Thank you for joining us. My name is Catherine Spencer-Ross, and I'm president of Heritage Ottawa and chair of its lecture series committee. Welcome to this evening's lecture, the first of our 2026 offerings. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge that Ottawa is at the heart of a vast homeland whose history reaches back long before the development of the National Capital Region as we now know it. For hundreds of years, Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples have been pressing for their Indigenous rights to be respected and their history to be understood. Heritage Ottawa makes efforts through our programs and partnerships to bring awareness to Algonquin history and heritage with events and programming. This is particularly key in the context of this evening's presentation. As you know, in 2026, Ottawa is marking the bicentennial of the city, which has evolved in this place over the last 200 years. During the next calendar year, Heritage Ottawa will continue to highlight different aspects of the city, from early Bytown to the present, through the examination of buildings and landscapes. This lecture series is no exception. It is fitting, therefore, that this evening's presentation about the recently completed Kìwekì Point focuses on a 21st century acknowledgement of conditions that facilitated the creation of what is now Canada's capital city. Algonquin people have been here for millennia, and French explorer Samuel de Champlain made contact with them in 1613 as he looked, perhaps from Kìwekì Point, at the confluence of the Rideau, Gatineau, and Ottawa rivers. Ottawa today is a busy and vibrant place, but some quiet and stunning views can be appreciated from this high point of land, allowing us to imagine a time before Bytown was first established. Before we get to our presentation, I should point out that our lecture series is made possible with the generous support of our leadership sponsor, Sandy Smallwood and Andrix Holdings, and of Merkley Supply Limited. We are also grateful for grants from the City of Ottawa and the Province of Ontario. I'd also like to thank those of you who are members and those of you who have made donations to Heritage Ottawa. Your support is vital to our sustainability as an organization and allows us to present programming such as this free lecture and to advocate for the preservation of our heritage resources. If you are a non-member, I invite you to join the organization, and I encourage you all to consider making a financial contribution to Heritage Ottawa. Please visit our website at heritageottawa.org for details. At the end of this evening's presentation, we will have a Q&A session moderated by Heritage Ottawa board member Robert Pajot. Thanks, Rob. It is now my privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening, who will share the story of Kìwekì Point with stunning images so appropriate on a cold, dark, and snowy winter evening. Garry Meus is a senior landscape architect with the National Capital Commission. Gary's career as an urban planner, landscape architect, and urban designer has focused on reshaping cities, towns, and communities through inclusive, culturally grounded, and forward-thinking design. He holds a Bachelor in Landscape Architecture from the University of Montréal and a graduate degree in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of New Orleans, with additional studies in urban growth development in Mexico. With experience in private, nonprofit, and public sectors, Garry brings a wealth of insight into creating vibrant, inclusive public spaces that reflect both cultural identity and community needs. It is now my great pleasure to turn the floor over to Garry.
Thank you, Catherine, for this great introduction and also to be able to be a part of this lecture series. I truly appreciate the fact of being able to share the project with the participants and the attendees in order to be able to kind of give more insight as to the project itself. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Garry Meus. I've been a senior landscape architect with the National Capital Commission for a little over 7 years now. And I've had the privilege of working on this project from the time that I actually began at the NCC. So it was a huge project from the beginning, and I've had the the privilege of being able to see this project go from the schematic design phase all the way to its completion through construction. So it's very dear to me as a project, but it's also dear to me because of the various relationships that have been built to be able to actually complete this project in the manner that it has. So on your screen right now, we have basically just a context and location of the project itself. To give you a better idea, the project sits behind the National Gallery of Canada. It was once known as Nepean Point before going through the toponymy program through the NCC to be able to be named as Kìwekì Point. From the park itself, you have amazing views of the National Capital Region, and especially those that are directly fronting the Ottawa River. And we look at the Canadian Museum of History, we look at Victoria Island, Parliament as one, the Supreme Court of Canada, and of course the Chateau Laurier as well. So to give you more of a better understanding of the components of the project. As I said, the project sits behind the National Gallery of Canada, and there are a variety of different pathways that lead you to the project. But the main one really is Majors Hill Park. Just to give you an understanding, the vision that the NCC has for development along the Ottawa River basically is named Rideau to Rideau, which basically translates itself from the Rideau Canal to the Rideau Falls. So being able to have a pedestrian link that takes visitors from the canal area, even mainly from Parliament, making their way all the way through to the Rideau Falls without having to go through any vehicular conflicts along the way. And this particular project, as Kìwekì Point, is one of the major features in being able to reaching that goal, and it's kind of setting the stage as to the relationships that the visitor experience has with making that journey all the way to Rideau Falls. So within this particular layout, you will see that there are a variety of different pathways that really built within the park itself. The pedestrian bridge, which is named Pedaban Passage, links the Majors Hill Park to Kìwekì Point. It is the formal entrance to Kìwekì Point, as it really takes the visitors going from Majors Hill Park directly onto Kìwekì Point. There's a perimeter pathway that goes completely around the park. The ridge pathway is the one that actually separates the National Gallery of Canada property to the NCC property. The meandering pathway, which brings you to the apex of the site, and the step pathway to the north, which also brings you to the exact same location. The different features within the park, we have the Whispering Point, which is the shelter that is along the perimeter pathway, that is the backdrop to a direct view of the National Capital Region. And there are a variety of different artistic elements, as well as two monuments that are part of the project site. You will also notice that within the project itself, when you do go and visit the ridge pathway, even though it's more of like an arterial pathway that separates two properties, it also actually is home to a variety of different art pieces that the National Gallery has had along the Nepean Point Park at the before the development, and that has basically taken it and kind of reintegrated them into an ad hoc a sculpture pathway, where you get to enjoy those art pieces along the ridge pathway. So to give you more of an idea of the finished product of the park itself, as you can see, you have a better view of the Whispering Point, which is in the foreground right now. But what you do get to enjoy is the fact that the perimeter pathway, which is basically the pathway that goes around the park itself, gives you the variety of different views that are possible. But then you also understand that if you're standing right in the middle of the Whispering Point, you basically have about a 180-degree view shed of the entire National Capital Region. But if you're making your way from the meandering pathway all the way to the apex of the site, there's an area that is right up top of the Whispering Point that is called the Outlook. And standing at the Outlook area basically gives you a 360-degree view of the entire National Capital Region. So we are really excited to be able to have visitors take in not only the views themselves and base their visit of the park with respect to the Ottawa River, but also be able to actually enjoy the journey of discovery as well as their interpretation of how they've enjoyed their visit. The first may be different than the second just because of the amount of different features that you get to enjoy while you're on site. So the design itself basically stems from an international design competition that was set in 2014. The designs that were very contemporary and really pushed the envelope of not only enhancing the visitor experience, but also the pedestrianization of the area as well. Janet Rosenberg Studios, which is a landscape architecture firm from Toronto, was pronounced as the winner of the international design competition. And what the NCC was able to do is work side by side with JRS Studios to be able to develop not only the design that won the design competition, but also refine how those features were part of the design competition into a more realistic journey that visitors will have while they're on site. So the design itself grew from that particular design competition, and as it grew and as it started toward implementation, we were fortunate enough to be able to begin the interpretation plan for the project within the time frame of the design. What that actually really did was enhance not only the exchanges that were possible for the design, but also really put forth not just the understanding, but really the collaborative work that was going to be possible with Algonquin community members being essential pieces in order to be able to enhance not only the design, but also the experience themselves. So as we kind of go through this segment of the presentation, I will be referring to the Ottawa River as the Kichizibi, which is essential to the understanding of the experience that you have on site. So within the interpretation, one of the key pieces has always been the vision for the park. The main vision was always understood as the big river landscape. And the reason for that was to be able to make sure that the visitor experience focused itself really on how to discover the river throughout the park. Not to say that you essentially had to have a view onto the park at all times. It was really geared toward the experience of the river, both visually as well as physically on site. So from there, we were able to partner with ERA architects in order to be able to kind of develop not only the vision for the project, but also the general theme as well as the sub themes that came through in order to be able to enhance how the development of the interpretation plan came about. And so really the key points that we were able to focus on were, one, to be able to include the Algonquin language, not just being able to focus on the official languages within the interpretation plan, but really make sure that we were recognizing what we were actually trying to develop as a main feature of relationship that the visitor would have with the site. And so recognizing the Kìwekì as the narrator was one of the first key instances of understanding the journey that a visitor would have on site. Then it was being able to understand the different relationships, both with the monuments as well as the artistic expressions, and then being able to see how to reintegrate the monuments within the site itself. So recall the construction of this particular project took place within a time that was really difficult to continue on with construction. Construction started in 2019, late 2019, right before the pandemic hit. And the result of the pandemic, we adjusted how the construction would move forward, but it didn't halt on how we would gather to be able to have exchanges as well as collaborate onto how the different pieces and features would be included within the project. And what we were able to do is basically take the times that we were able to gather on site with Algonquin community members in order to be able to kind of understand, what actually did it mean to be on site, and at the same time understanding how the design would benefit from this type of collaboration. And so as we started the journey of being able to see all of the different components themselves, the essential piece to the interpretation plan was to decipher how to create these different zones of discovery as you make your way through the design of the site. So the primer zone basically is your introduction. It's the site identity sign that gives you the information that welcomes you to the site. You have the monument zone that is basically the location of where Samuel de Champlain is located, as well as the Kìwekì Imini monument, which was known previously as a scout statue. And then we have the artistic elements that are part of the perimeter zone. And these features were guided by Algonquin community members being able to really focus on the evolution of how the river basically evolved through time. So the primer zone gives you the introduction to Kìwekì Point. You have first the park itself as far as an introduction. You have the introduction of the river as being your narrator and your guide through the site. And we have the land acknowledgement as well. So this tri-panel site identity sign basically gives you that piece, those pieces of information right off the bat as you enter the site. The monuments themselves were always part of the reintegration, or were always part of the design. Their reintegration was also part of how to be able to venture through the site. You also have to understand that within the time frame of the pandemic, and there were a variety of different periods during that time where many of the monuments that were in particular sites throughout the world were actually being either defaced or taken down or removed from a variety of different areas. The NCC, through the collaboration of Algonquin community members, we were able to focus on how to not take them away, but actually reintegrate them to the design by finding purpose to them as visitors would come and experience the site. Please keep in mind that, again, the interpretation is the river telling the story of, telling you its story of evolution. There's no denying of the presence of either a variety of different communities or people that have traveled the river, as the river basically is essentially telling the story of all of these different pieces that are intertwined within its evolution. So where the placement of all these monuments, we'll go through into detail a little bit further, but it's essential to understand that the river is the one telling the story, and it's not us discovering either that monument for a particular definition. It's truly the river that's actually introducing these elements. So Samuel de Champlain, which is one of the monuments, was part of Nepean Point at the time. Its reintegration was geared toward being able to understand his travels through the area and understand as well his impact for the National Capital Region. And so where he is located is along the meandering pathway, which basically leads you to the apex of the site. One of the ideas within being able to locate him at that location is that his travels that took him along the river, within the bends, and however he was traveling at the time, now being reversed for the visitor to experience those winding pathways and discovering through the changes of grade from the introduction, from the site introduction all the way to the apex, is when you actually encounter him. So it's basically giving him the purpose of being discovered by the visitors themselves coming through the site. So the idea was always to see about how he would best fit in, and the being able to have the support of Algonquin community members, both from both from Pikwakanagan and both from Pikwakanagan and the Algonquin of I don't know why I'm blanking, but I apologize wholly for this. It was part of how we were able to really focus on moving the reintegration of the monument itself within the site plan, and being able to have visitors really enjoy their journey all the way to the apex of the site. Kichizibi Unini, his story basically is really one of displacement throughout its time on within the park area. For those of you who have remembered how he was placed at the foot of the Samuel de Champlain plinth area at its inception, then displaced to Major Hill Park, all of which basically within the design competition made it so that he would always come back to Kìwekì Point. But it was really truly finding a way to reintegrate him as the purpose that he filled within how his understanding was. And so within the understanding of his purpose, which mainly was as a guide to the journeying communities, he really is placed in an area where he is now looking over the river itself as um, as the incoming traffic or features or elements are making their way through the river. And so now at this convergence of the river, which is the Gatineau River, the Rideau River, and the Ottawa River, Kichizibi is now placed in an area where he is now overseeing how those elements are making their way through the river, and now also part of his purpose toward being able to guide visitors and understand and make them understand his purpose within the design. So it was truly something where we worked hand in hand, not just being able to actually have the placement for him, but also being able to understand how to describe him within the context of the park itself, the design, and his purpose. And so we were really grateful to be able to work with both nations to be able to really focus on how his reintegration would be marked on site, but then also being able to really focus on how he shows his purpose within the design itself. One of the features that you will encounter when you're on site is the artistic elements that kind of give you a little bit more of the natural elements that were part of the evolution of the river itself. The idea was not just to give particular features within the site, but more really looking at the creatures themselves that were part of the river's evolution within the localized area. And so with that, the NCC partnered again with our community, with both communities, to be able to have an artist sketch the variety of different elements that would be a part of those artistic expressions. And the key element here, as you can see in the center piece of this slide, is the Thunderbird. And the Thunderbird, being a mythical creature, has kind of reframed how the dimension of these creatures really would move forward within the design. And so the reference to them at this stage of the interpretation plan was to focus on them as being beings and not creatures, because of the Thunderbird being a mythical one. And so from the moose to the bear to the walleye, all of these are now part of a way for the visitor to experience these different beings as they make their way through the perimeter pathway. Now, the transformation from the sketch to the actual artistic pieces is really where we went from taking those sketches, transforming them into to follow the similar design features of both the striations as well as a variety of different features within the site, to be able to kind of understand and give them depth as far as 3D representations of those sketches. And what we were able to really focus our attention on was being able to see these features now basically taking shape, and their integration into the site now is truly one that we are truly grateful for, because they are center to the perimeter pathway and how visitors themselves are making their way through that particular pathway, but at the same time always seeing the variety of features themselves as they are now in the foreground of the river itself. One key feature that you may witness on your visit is that throughout the design, there are interpretation panels that are placed within the areas of where the monuments as well as the artistic expressions are. Most of these particular features always have the river telling the story or introducing those elements. When it comes to the artistic expressions, it is now their voice that you are encountering within that area of the perimeter pathway. So it is a break within that understanding of them presenting themselves and how they were part of the evolution of the river. So to give you a quick idea, as you can see the walleye here, you will also see where the interpretation panel is located, and the interpretation panel, which gives you that particular description of the walleye, really giving you those pieces of information, are displayed in English, French, and the Algonquin language as well. Now, within the feature that I had mentioned earlier, the Whispering Point, as you can see, where the bear is located within the foreground of the river. So it is truly where the experience itself of having the shelter, being able to oversee the National Capital Region, and being able to enjoy not just the way that the river is presented, but also in a way that everything all comes together, with hopes that every journey that you take while you're on site really gives you more opportunities to enjoy the river, but at the same time, all of the different and various features that come into play with the overall design of the site. And with that, I'm pleased to be able to take any questions as this ends my presentation, but really thankful for everyone to have tuned in, to be able to take in how we've gone from the schematic phase of the project all the way to its completion, and hopefully your enjoyment.
Great. Well, thank you, Garry. Good evening, everybody. Robert Pajot here, a board member from Heritage Ottawa. Garry, thank you, and thank you for this presentation, and congratulations on this project. What an amazing project. I hope the NCC gave you a lifetime reserved seating for a seat up there for Canada Day fireworks, because it's such an amazing site. Maybe I'll ask you if you want to perhaps. Unless we have a specific question for one of your slides, maybe you can stop your screen sharing so we can get each other on the screen. So I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in already into the Q&A box, which we'll get to them. I will summarize, and sometimes I'll mix some of them together. I was a number of questions that I've had and coming in. Maybe I'll just jump in first of all with along the edge pathway between the National Gallery and the site, the Kìwekì Point site. Have there been discussions with the National Gallery of Canada yet on potential furthering of the storytelling potential of the site, or just you said they're sort of taking an ad hoc approach for now, using items from their collection of exterior sculptures? Has there been discussions yet with the National Gallery about the potential of evolving the storytelling potential of that pathway?
Yes, the National Gallery of Canada was, or has been, basically a huge partner within the development of the design, really by being able to utilize their existing sculptures within the new design, but at the same time also creating different links, direct links from Kìwekì Point to the National Gallery. And so there have been a variety of different design iterations that would link the cafeteria space directly to the park, as well as the there's one artistic expression that is a kind of like a zigzag pathway that brings you to the ridge pathway, which separates both sites. This was a design from Miss Oberlander, who was a famous landscape architect, and basically created this op art pathway to be able to link the gallery area onto, at the time, the Nepean Point site. There have been various iterations of being able to take that into making it a formal connection as well, and kind of taking a variety of different features and future artistic expressions from the National Gallery into finding spaces within Kìwekì Point as well. So even though I believe that there are 5 art pieces right now that are part of that area, and there's always room for growth because, as I said, our partnership with the National Gallery of Canada has always been one to kind of open things up to be able to have their artistic expression way to the vision of the park and the purpose that it has always been part of the discussion.
Great. No, that'll be great to see how that evolves and continues, and hopefully it keeps evolving and being a bit playful with that space between the two, because can be an evolution to that storytelling, and it's great that
yes,
hopefully there's the respect for the Cornelia Oberlander landscape as well. Tons of questions coming in here, and a couple of them I'm seeing are related to what you mentioned at one point, the NCC's vision for the relationship to the river, the Rideau to Rideau portion of it. And a bunch of people are wondering about that, and how Kìwekì Point is going to be linked into that route that you were talking about. And will there be a link between Kìwekì Point to the Rideau Falls, for example?
So the vision that the NCC has is really to basically pedestrianize the experience of going from Parliament Hill all the way to the Rideau Falls. The success story now is going from Parliament Hill and reaching Kìwekì Point without having to go through any vehicular conflicts. And so being able to have Kìwekì Point as one of the major features of that visioning plan, you can sense that it's probably more of like a step 1 at this point. And now it's part of how do we get visitors to go from Kìwekì Point onto following the river pathway. So what that means is that where the ridge pathway and the perimeter pathway of Kìwekì Point kind of end at the north end of the site, that's a landing point where there would be a connection at this point leading you onto, and if you're familiar with that area of the Ottawa River, it basically would lead you to Lady Grey Drive, which is now under construction. So the area behind the Global Center of Pluralism, the Mint, and the National Gallery of Canada. That area would now be the receiving end as to how we would get from Kìwekì Point all the way to Lady Grey Drive to be able to get that as a pedestrianization link.
Wow, there's a lot of stairs.
Yes, stairs, but there are a variety of different ways that the connection is being envisioned, and exciting to see what the final product can be to be able to link in a universal accessible way toward the Rideau Falls.
Oh, very interesting. That'll be really interesting to follow the development of that, because there's so many options. Again, I know the NCC has been making lots of efforts to get the public back having access to Kichizibi, and so any of all these projects linking together will be very, very cool. Another question, just quickly about the archaeology that was done. Mostly, I'm assuming you probably had to do some archaeology, or was there any needed on the site as part of this project? Could you just speak to that?
So there were studies that were completed for the archaeology of the kind of like the pre-studies done for a variety of different projects. What really kind of stood out was the amount of contamination that actually was on site, which was a grueling exercise because when there is a heavy amount of contamination, it basically clears a lot of what is happening on site. We were fortunate that there weren't any findings on the archaeological portion to be able to see how to evolve the implementation of the project. And we were fortunate enough that at that stage, we were basically clear to be able to actually move forward on the implementation stage without having to, without being interrupted by particular findings on site.
Just out of curiosity, was the contamination just from its use as the amphitheater, or was it from the former National Printing Bureau that used to be where the National Gallery was before the National Gallery?
So remnants of the cannonballs that were there historically at the beginning. There were the amphitheater that was there before. A variety of different pieces that unfortunately made it so that the amount of contamination was quite high.
Okay, I was just curious. Speaking of the amphitheater, in the initial discussions of the conceptualization, because that amphitheater, having been there and seen some amazing shows, it's such a wonderful location for shows. The discussions at the conceptual stage to remove that public gatherings function of it. Can you maybe discuss that? Like, I mean, I don't know if it was just the lawyers involved of having that many people with those cliffs right there. Maybe the lawyers got involved and said it's not a smart place to have that large of a gathering of people. But could maybe just talk about that?
So the unfortunate thing with the amphitheater question was truly because of programming, where the NCC no longer was managing that piece of putting events forward. And so within the design competition for Kìwekì Point, there was an amphitheater that was actually part of the design. It was taking the same type of design of the Whispering Point and reflecting it facing the National Gallery of Canada. And so you had two architectural structures within the initial design competition that were basically back to back, I guess, that you can kind of envision in that manner, and treated the exact same with the same type of architectural language. The problem that really developed is because the NCC basically we're no longer programming events within anywhere on their assets. So the Astrolab itself basically remained vacant for several years because of programming not being done. And then on top of that, partners weren't taking the Astrolab as being part of an opportunity either. Just as a little tidbit of information, the National Gallery of Canada has an amphitheater that is within the Taiga Garden that is along St. Patrick Street. And that as well is not being used either. So presenting another amphitheater option within Kìwekì Point seemed more of an overkill to one, the NCC not programming the area or not programming at all, and two, not having partners to be able to kind of like push within that direction, and an existing feature or asset of the National Gallery of Canada not being used either. So because of those particular elements, the amphitheater at the competition design phase was scoped out of the project in order to be able to really move and focus the attention on the sole architectural feature, which basically is the Whispering Point.
Okay, thanks. From an actual landscape architecture, or at least the living portions of the site, in terms of the plantings, I know it's all fresh and new and young. Can you speak? It's all nice and clean now. Can you talk about the selection of the trees, perhaps, and the living components of the landscape, and what we're going to be looking forward to in the next coming years as it matures as a site?
So we've been very fortunate to work with Janet Rosenberg Studios on this project. Just as a landscape architect, it was a pleasure to have a landscape architect as being the prime for the project, which basically put more emphasis on the details themselves actually being built. And so it was not a secondary approach. It was actually a primary approach of having an LA being the main the main consultant in being able to push forward with the variety of different elements on site. Now, I talked about it a little bit during the presentation. The features themselves, we look at plant material that, one, through our discussion and our collaboration with Algonquin community members, was to push for not only native plant material, but also material that really evoked senses of the river. So as you look at the different areas within the plan, you will see that there are areas of manufactured lawn where basically are inviting people to basically just enjoy, sit, picnic, like do the passive type of recreation. But at the same time, you also have areas of growing grasses that kind of evoke more of movement. And that's where the river basically is again sensed throughout the design, because these grasses are part of the understanding of going through the meandering pathway leading you to where the wind actually picks up a little bit more, and the flow of the sounds themselves that are going through the variety of different trees that are part of the landscape now are being heard, not solely being seen, but also heard. So you have this audio feel that going from the use of river birches because of the texture of the bark to be able to be seen throughout the entire landscape, to the use of evergreen trees in certain areas, shaping how you would how your visual view sheds actually are being guided throughout the site, to be able to even have so within the perimeter pathway. We have a section that where you have the guardrail that is on one side and the perimeter pathway, which is a little bit more elevated. That continuous planting scheme that goes completely around the site is called the landscape haha, which basically is a fancy term to say ditch, really, but basically being able to be on the perimeter pathway and have plantings themselves being on the foreground while the backdrop is the Ottawa River.
Okay, yeah, I can't wait to see it through. I haven't been in the winter time yet, but to see how that is going to evolve is going to be great. Another question about, could you name the artists responsible for those beautiful sculptures? The Thunderbird is magnificent. Do you have the names of the artists?
So John Tanasco is the artist from Kiriganzibi that basically provided the sketches for the artistic expressions. And then it actually went from those sketches to our design team, to to LID Ironworks in Tiny, Ontario, to kind of develop and follow those types of 3D renderings that were evoked from the sketches to be able to produce those artistic expressions.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're really successful. They're really lovely. Is there a particular part of the project that you are especially proud of? I was just thinking that is one that's really tangible, but is there something that you at a personal level are most proud of this project? As a person in charge of a project, there must be.
I would have to say that my one greatest accomplishment has truly been being able to work with Algonquin community members from Kitigan-Zibi and Pikwakanagan. It's really opened my eyes into seeing, as a landscape architect, being able to understand what the land is giving you, and being able to really focus on how the features themselves are not just part of a beautification process. They're part of a journey that you actually are going to be taking once you're on site. So you really get a sense to go and visit, see all the different features, and you go a second time and you see different features just because of how the park is designed. And if you make it during the winter time, the perimeter pathway is the only pathway, and the ridge pathway, that are winter maintained. So the meandering pathway leading you to the apex of the site isn't winter maintained. But once those seasons come into play, come to pass, sorry, and you're able to venture throughout the entire site, you get to really get a sense of how the wind picks up as you're making your journey toward the apex, how you feel the sense of kind of like tranquility when you're under the whispering point, when you feel the sense of openness when you're crossing the Pidaban Passage, as you get a sense of not only crossing the river, but not of crossing the river, but crossing St. Patrick Street and having a direct view shed as to the Alexander Bridge, the shores on the Quebec side. As you make your way to Kìwekì Point, you kind of oversee the shores on the Ontario side. Like it's an experience where you really need to be able to kind of focus on a variety of different things, and at the same time, certain things are going to surprise you.
I guess it's also provides, being there at different times of day and year provides opportunities to see the play of light on the water, the height of the river. It's such a living thing that changes throughout the year, and even during a day, if the wind drops and things calm down, it's a completely different feeling when you're up there. It is really, really wonderful. Just a couple logistics questions. When was the project actually completed? Because a couple people have gone and said some of the interpretation wasn't there when they were last there, and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I didn't see that." So when was it actually completed with all the signage? Oh, I see a smile. What happened? There's a story
well, there is a huge story, and the reason
oops.
is that the official opening to the site was May 16th of last year, of 2025. And the reason why I laugh is because I have never been in a situation in my entire career where people were physically taking down construction fencing and hoarding to access the site. And I say this because for about 5 weeks before the grand opening, from I believe it was Easter, like prior to the Easter weekend, we had to go back to the site to basically revise, change, and try to put better locks on fencing because people were taking down the fencing to be able to access. And it's funny because even when we got certain posts from people visiting, we had a variety of people commenting on, oh, it seems so unfinished, and there's this on the ground, and there are these pieces. And on the project team, we were basically saying it isn't finished. Like, we don't understand why people are there right now.
The population was just so eager to get on site. But was all of the interpretation done as of last May, or were there signs? Because some people were wondering, because over the summer, some of the interpretation for Kichisan or Inini wasn't the interpretation.
Nope, all of the interpretation was completed at the time of the opening.
It was okay. Yes, there was a question about that. Okay, yeah, but it's a place that is clearly near and dear to people's hearts that they wanted to go up. They were so eager. I know we're not going to talk about the incident with the bus because it's been in the media, and it's extraordinarily frustrating and unfortunate that a school bus somehow made it onto the site and created some damage. I'm assuming there will be changes, modifications to the entranceway, the bollards, please. I guess.
Well,
how will that be maintained? That access point that some persons could interpret as an vehicular, which shouldn't, because none of the language is there for that. But somebody drove up there. How will that be prevented, I guess?
So part of the design for that particular entrance is that bollards are there, but are removed when the National Gallery of Canada receives either particular deliveries within that section, because that particular entrance
is shared. It's shared with the National Gallery.
I am assuming that the incident occurred during that time of delivery, that the bollards were down, and that particular person took advantage of just that timing. But the bollards are there. They are there to be able to prevent vehicles from going up, except in times of the National Gallery needing their service deliveries or services being delivered at the gallery.
Yes, very extraordinarily unfortunate that it happened so dramatically, and in so much of the media coverage about it.
It's truly unfortunate, but we're hoping that things get rectified in a decent time frame, but logistically, it's the damage that has been done is not just a little scrape here and there. It's understanding that these wooden features are interlinked and that are part of a greater understanding of the feature itself that basically has been impacted. And so that impact is not just a scrape, it's also the pressure that was put on the wood that dislodged sections of those areas completely. And that's where the repairs need to occur, where the back of house needs to be accessed to be able to see how all of this basically gets rectified.
Enough about that, because it's too frustrating. Well, we're getting close to a wrap up. Just maybe a final question about, you said one of the highlights was just the development of the relationship that you've had with the Anishinaabe, the Algonquin Anishinaabe communities. Can you see that relationship, or how that might impact on future NCC projects because there's the NCC has so many projects, have a number completed, and they're really hitting it out of the park in the past few years with some amazing projects, and there are others underway. Do you have a sense that is really that relationship that you've developed with Kìwekì Point is going to have an impact on your future projects?
I really hope it does. I think that what we were able to develop with the interpretation plan was truly revolutionary. The NCC had not focused the interpretation in that manner, And it's really through our Indigenous Affairs liaison at the time, Rainey Tenasco, that we were able to forge these types of great relationships with chiefs, with community members, with cultural centers, to be able to have really profound exchanges on the meaning and how the park itself would be received. And for myself, I think that that's where the genius of the park comes from, is that collaboration, because that collaboration enabled all of these different features to kind of come together on one site and to really enhance not just the visitor experience, but really the narrator, which really is the Ottawa River, and make that the star of that particular visit. So I think that we've been fortunate to be able to develop such a plan, and I'm really hoping that that type of experience really bleeds into other projects that Algonquin community members can be a part of, so that that feeling of just completeness within how projects are being implemented really kind of goes through the entirety of the project's lifespan.
Great. Well, let's hope. That's great news. I would like to really thank you, Garry, for this. This is really, really exciting to hear, and it's such, as Catherine said off the top, it's beautiful to see photos of the green landscapes on the cold, dark winter's night. But congratulations again on the project, and thank you so much for sharing it with us tonight.
Oh, my great pleasure, Rob, for being part of Heritage Ottawa and being able to kind of share one of the successes of the NCC with the attendees from tonight's lecture series.
Great. Well, we will call on you again for other projects in the future for sure. Before we wrap the event up, though, just a couple other things, a couple notes regarding our February lecture, which will be on February 18th. It's going to be a panel discussion on the ever-present and very real issue of demolition by neglect. So the panel is going to have people, representatives of the Westboro and Centertown communities, the City of Ottawa, and Heritage Ottawa. That's on February 18th. So you please pre-register. It'll be online. So that's on the 18th. And another reminder is that in beginning of March, we are having our second Heritage Ottawa online auction. So you'll be invited to bid on a wide variety of items, from tickets to Stratford, restaurants, hotel stays, pieces of artwork, sculpture. There'll be lots of wonderful things. So we're still accepting donations if you want something to be donated to that auction. This is an important fundraiser for us at Heritage Ottawa. So if you have anything, we're still accepting donations, but mark it in your calendars. From between March 8th and 14th, you'll be hearing about it if you're members. And leads me to my last point. If you are a member, thank you very much for being a member of Heritage Ottawa. And if you're not, we hope this great talk tonight will encourage you to become members of Heritage Ottawa to help us continue to tell stories and help protect heritage in the City of Ottawa. So with that, thank you very much once again, Garry, and thank you everybody for your great questions. And we'll see you next month. Cheers. Good night, everybody. Bonsoir.